Welcome to The Final Edit, a podcast brought to you by Maison, a private network for 7 to 9 figure female founders where women redefine success, legacy, and influence.
We're your hosts, Maritza and Hannah Nieves. We're co-founders, mothers, and builders behind a billion-dollar vision.
These conversations are with leading founders who are shaping the industry and the future as they build it.
Welcome to The Final Edit. Welcome to another episode of The Final Edit. Today we are talking about what happens in business when your personal life is on fire. There's this idea that once you've built real success, you should have the resources and the systems to handle anything. And then life happens anyway. And the thing that nobody tells you is that at this level, with a team, a brand, investors, a community watching, the cost of a hard season is completely different. At earlier stages, you can disappear for a week. But at this level, there's a team, a payroll, a public brand, a community with expectations. The stakes of falling apart are fundamentally different. And that's what makes the hard season so much harder to navigate. I would love to hear your take on this, Hannah, because this is such a juicy episode, because I feel like, and I don't know if who else can relate to this, but to me, business feels like 10% is things going the way that they should, and those successful moments and the wins, and 90% is everything's on fire.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because even like looking at our Instagram, I was looking before we were on the podcast, and you see like our glorious Sign talking circle, and we've had these like beautiful events, and they're so gorgeous and like curated, but it's like people don't understand like all of the challenges and tribulations that go into that. And what I think is really interesting is that, with Maison specifically, we always say Maison is a network that's not just about supporting you and advancing your company, but also your life. And we always say that it's meant to meet you where you're at. We have women in the network that are going through divorce, they're going through miscarriages, they're going through surrogacy, they're birthing babies, they're doing life and, exiting partnerships, like you name it, it's like happening in the network. And I think that we have always kind of been told that like we should be able to handle this, and everything needs to be perfect. And I know I've had my own personal experiences with this, but also like so many of our members have and are going through this. And I think for a lot of high achieving women, like the stakes are even higher because it's like you are put on a pedestal of like you have to have your shit figured out.
Yep.
And which I do agree to some degree in the sense of like how you present yourself, how you hold yourself with your team at the end of the day. But vulnerability is also really important too, because I think it also allows other people to feel safe to also share, which is something that we incorporate into Maison.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that what we've seen as well is that there's some sort of shame with going through hard seasons. And it's almost like because you're high achieving and you have reached a certain milestone in your business or that public facing success, that you have immunity towards, hard seasons in life. And that's not the case. And sometimes, and I would say in the beginning of Maison, no, not so much now, but in the beginning, some of our women would come to us one-to-one to share about the hard seasons. And we would always say, we really encourage you to share this in your inner circle, which is our small intimate groups of 9 that we have in Maison, and or to share this, if they felt called like in our broader community call, because that's when you realize that you are not alone. But it comes first, with feeling like you are in an environment that you can trust and that you are supported. And it's been really great to see how those conversations have unfolded over time, to your point, when we can share vulnerably and be in a space that allows us to do that.
And I think it's it's interesting, right? Because for a lot of our women, they are very visible. They're at the front of their brands. And so I know I've had to deal with this as well, which is, what to say, what not to say, how to say it, because I think it's very easy to either crawl in a hole and just like not share anything and or go completely dark, which there's seasons for that. But then there's also the, airing all your dirty laundry out on social media conversation. And it's like, what does that do? And so I always filter through like, number one, like how does me sharing this, actually help someone, and sharing from the narrative of like, this is the lesson learned versus like, oh my God, I'm going through XYZ thing and wanting pity for it, because I feel like I've had to do that. Have you ever had to experience that on your end?
Yes, and I think both you and I have been really transparent in our stories because we are in a position where we need to lead by example. And so we have been really open and honest about a lot of like the hardships that we're navigating on the back end. And on that note, I want to talk a little bit about something that you said earlier, and it's that grief, that a lot of us are navigating and going through. Because I know for you, you had a miscarriage that led to you realizing, wait a second, I need a place like Maison to be able to have other women to share this with. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like and how you still showed up to lead and face your business? What was that moment really like for you?
It's wild because I literally can go back in my brain, like visually, like where I was. I was sitting at the top of this Airbnb looking over the cliffs of Malibu. It was like so wild. And I was on a month-long trip, which started at me being at a mastermind retreat. And I kind of knew that I was already going through a miscarriage. And if you've ever been through one before, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I remember that I was in this room and there's nothing wrong with it, nothing wrong with the room specifically, but I just didn't have the space to share it. And so I kind of suffered in silence. And I remember going through that and I was like, why is it that like once you reach this certain threshold, it's like the rooms that you're in are only about money, your net worth, how many Instagram followers you have, and just like the vanity metrics. And I couldn't be real with like, hey, like I'm struggling with this or I'm struggling with XYZ. And so that was really the catalyst because I realized there weren't a lot of rooms like this. Many of the rooms I was coming across were, either extremely male dominated, which there's nothing wrong with that either. But again, it's hard to understand the nuances of being a mom, a mother, a wife, a CEO when you're a man. Like it's just the realities. And I found also that, when I did find other communities at this caliber, again, they were just so transactional, didn't leave space to allow for this type of growth. And what I've found is that like true deep connection also comes from authenticity, and authenticity also comes from vulnerability. And if you can be vulnerable with people with what you're going through. And I remember like I got off, I was going through the day and I had a meeting with the team and I had like let them know on the call. I was like, hey, I'm struggling with this. And I remember it was like first time I was able to actually like open myself up to the team about what I was going through. But I think what's really interesting is that, like I said, is like, once you get to this point in your business, like our women in Maison are the top, 1% to 2% of female founders, meaning like there's only a small fraction of women that get to the point of, building a business that generates 7 figures a year. It's fucking hard. It is not easy. And what we realized was that there just weren't a lot of spaces for this type of woman. And it was such an overlooked, space. And I think for women at this level, there is so much loneliness, in sharing your success with other people, who are not in this business or do what you do. There's loneliness sometimes with your family. There's loneliness in your marriages. There's loneliness of being also a mom and the guilt that you face between both worlds. And so it's like an epidemic that we've been seeing on the back end. And Maison actually brings that conversation to the forefront, which I think is like so powerful.
Yeah. And I think one of the powerful things too is we have this call in Maison. It's our Motherhood Village call. We host them quarterly. And we talk about systems like for your household, because
Mhm.
also as high achieving women, if you're also a mother or a caretaker, a parent in any sense of the word, you also have like a very real life behind the scenes that you have
Mhm.
to take care of. And so systems for your life really come into play here when things get really hard. And so I think that that has been, a game changer, at least for me, just
Mhm.
understanding ways that I can also optimize my life in different areas and where I can bring in more support and not feel like, oh, I'm not good enough to run a household because I've now outsourced about 80% of the things that I should be able to do, as a woman, right? And so
Mhm.
I think there's also just so much stigma and pressure from society about, what we should be able to handle and not handle. And I think just being okay with like, okay, well, this is like what needs my utmost attention. And this is where, maybe something is really chaotic in my life that needs to be under control, and I can make sure that I take care of that so that it opens me up to then doing the
Mhm.
things that need my focus and my drive. So
I love that. And I think also, especially in partnerships too, whether it's, your partnership with your spouse, your partner, or even just like business partners, like, Maritza and I are co-founders. We're basically married. I mean, we actually are like via contract, but like, even for us, what I've also seen that has like worked really well is just even the vulnerability, like in our own relationship of how we operate. Cause there are seasons where, you might be going through something or like I'm going through something. I feel like I've moved 59 times in the last few years, gone through like the highs of highs, but also like the very lows of lows,
Mhm.
and even in this past year, like being able to say, hey, like I'm stressed out today. Like I'm not feeling it today.
Mhm.
I'm feeling overwhelmed. And even like the old version of me would have never said that. The old version of
Mhm.
me would have shown up and be like, leave your
She
emotions
would
at
have,
the
yeah, she
door,
would have
okay?
tried to work through everything and anything.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that also has been a really big shift. I mean, also I think like motherhood really changed that for me personally, but
Mhm.
really coming to, the conclusion of like, hey, like it's okay to not be okay. We have our job to do, but it's like really important to also like share that with someone
Mhm.
else so they know like where you're coming
Yeah.
from,
Yeah, I think it's okay to have a breakdown. Like let's just put it out there.
Mhm.
Let's just get it out the way. It's okay to have a breakdown. It's okay to cry if you need to, like feel your emotions. It's okay for things not to be going right. Just have a moment, take a breath, and then just figure out what, needs your focus.
Mhm.
You're not going to be able to do everything, and even operate with the same gusto that you would in a normal season. And so I think it's first like honoring that you
Mhm.
are going through something with yourself, right? Like with your own nervous system. Like, hey, yes, we are going through something.
Mhm.
We are going to be okay. Let's have a moment. And then figuring out again, I can't stress this enough as somebody that has been through like major chronic burnout and so many different things to the point that I've felt like my body has betrayed me because I have felt fine, but my body has not been fine type of vibes, right? And so from that place, I tell you, like, just find a moment, a breath with yourself and then realize like, okay, because I am not going to be at my highest self right now, these are the critical things that I need to do. And if you don't even have the mental space or the capacity to do that, this is a great use case for AI. And once again, this
Mhm.
is why we're such proponents, for leveraging AI in this way, because this is a great support tool that we all have access to in this very moment. So ask AI, based on my to dos, on my business priorities, on the KPIs that I am trying to hit, what are like
Mhm.
the top most needle movers that I need to focus on, and pause everything else, right? And at least give yourself that space to heal and to deal with whatever it is that you are going through in your personal life, because they're not exclusive, right? Like your personal life and your business are not mutually exclusive. They have to
Mhm.
coexist. So it's about finding, that integrated path that doesn't then land you in the hospital.
I feel that so deeply as someone who also went to the hospital for burnout. And I feel like for a lot of you listening, probably have had like very similar experiences. I feel like the burnout cycle of entrepreneurship is ever evolving, but I think it's also because of this pressure of having to be perfect and this pressure of having to show up like nothing is wrong and like you're a machine at the end of the day. And I think people nowadays are just like they want authenticity. They want to crave like they're feeling seen, and people don't want to see the robots anymore on social media, So I think that's why it's also really important in Maison specifically, like having a community, that can support you in those seasons is like critical.
Yeah. You need a room to share it with.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And if not a room, at least a person.
Yeah.
So if you take anything away from this episode, let it be that you need to have at least one person that you can totally like let loose with and tell them everything and let them be there for you. Let them support you. Don't isolate yourself, because that's definitely, I think, the worst approach. When you isolate yourself and you feel like, okay, well, clearly, I'm not meant to do this because I can't even handle this and this. Like, do not believe that lie.
Yeah. Ooh, I feel that. Okay. So I'd love to know, right? What's one thing that you now know that you needed during that hard season?
For sure, being in the right room. Like now that I have seen our Maisons share so transparently, and I've been in so many rooms at this point as well, with public figures, with celebrities, with politicians, with 7, 8, 9-figure founders. Okay, that is literally what Maison is. And we are all one and the same when it comes to going through hard seasons. No one, absolutely no one is immune to that. And I think having known that sooner, because I grew up in a time where we did not have this, even like the fake authenticity from social media, like everybody was sharing their flat lays and like their very aesthetic, workspaces. And it was a very curated time on social media. This was circa 2010. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and date myself once again. And so I think in those times of social media, you really felt like you were alone. No one was sharing their dirty laundry at all. And so I just wish that I would have been exposed to more of the realities so that I didn't, when I started my business then in 2012, I felt so alone when I was going through business struggles, even figuring out like if I should be an LLC or if I should be a C Corp and what the differences were. And no one was even talking about stuff like that online at the time, right? And so that's my take, just kind of knowing sooner that once again, like there's rooms where you can just be transparent and you're not alone.
Ooh, I love that. I have nothing to add because that's literally everything that I was going to say, which is just like being in the right room. This was such a good episode and so timely. And so if you've enjoyed this, go ahead and send us a DM on Instagram at Join Maison. We'd love to connect with you on there. And if you are wanting to be in this room, we have a link below. You can book a quick 15-minute private call with our team to see if this is the right room for you. So we'd love to hear from you, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you so much for tuning in. See you next time.